Tapping in.
Are we live?
Psych.
Leave it in. Leave that in. I like it. Yo, I can't lie, man. I've been excited for this all week, bro. I have been excited for this right here, man. Listen. Today on our Stumble Upon segment, we are going to find out a little bit about each other, or at least share a little bit of each other with the world. And I think that's beautiful. Can I start? Can we spotlight you first?
For sure. And if we're just, letting the folks know exactly what it is we're going to be getting into, is for this particular Stumble Upon section, we figured that we'd open up this conversation into, like you said, sharing ourselves and kind of interviewing each other. So as always, this over here is an open conversation. So do feel free to jump into the chats if you have questions. We'll read them live and, we can all engage and open this conversation even further. I like the questions that you had. I almost want to mirror them, but definitely please do start. I'll be more than happy to be the first interviewee.
Dope. All right, so let me get right, because this is gonna be important one day. Like, this is gonna be like archived, museumed, documentaryatized. Like, this is important, right? So please state your name for the record.
Oh man, this is a police investigation is what it is. I've seen enough of those.
Police, that's what we do while we edit the podcast. We watch police investigation videos. So this also have a tint of that. It's gonna be great.
And if you also want to go down that rabbit hole, that JCS, it's that's the name of the channel, JCS. They're interviewing these dudes. It's crazy.
It's nuts. All right, sir. State your name.
Zula Kegila, aka Chestnut Tones.
I appreciate that. So my guy, this has been you lived in Venezuela, you've lived in Germany, you've lived in South Africa, you've lived in the United States, you've lived in Scotland. Where is home for you, and what does home mean to you?
Home is a very fluid concept, right? Home is definitely where there's people that care. Home is where home is. It's funny when they say home is where you can use the bathroom comfortably. it's the term, and that's where home is. And I think in as you mentioned, those journeys, what's been incredible is that the universe has always provided me with a home. And I think that's a big part of our relationship and our friendship, is that your family took me in and made a home and, opened up a home to me. And my family was happily able to do the same thing for you. And because of that, Chicago is home for me. So that's what it is. But home, South Africa, Chicago as well, I'd have to say.
Yes, I appreciate, it's more than mutual. One of the biggest, changes in my life was coming to Africa and finding home there, right? And in the way that I hope that we've provided home for you this side in Chicago. So that's dope, man. So it's been a non-linear path. There's a lot of dots on the map there. Can you describe how you got to where you are right now as someone who's focused on impact? And please don't leave out the cameras and the private jets and seriously, the shift from Mandula Capital to Mandula Foundation. I think some of the choices you've made are important for people to hear.
and I laugh because you've been there each step of the journey. So you've seen you've watched this journey very closely as we have each other's. And if I'm being as succinct as I can be with all of that, is it really has just been a moment of being very fortunate, man. It's really been a series of very, very fortunate events. One of those fortunate events was, at least where the turning point is that I believe you found your purpose of impact at the same time that I found my purpose of impact. And because of that, we're able to form a very strong bond around that. And so I think how I define things is pre that moment and post that moment right now. You got BC and AD. That's not before COVID.
Before community, but after community focus. I like it. I like it. It's spot on.
That's what it's been, in that journey, there's been, I think at some point it became an exercise of an entrepreneurial route of just trying to do things by ourselves, by myself, whatever the case is. And then before that, it was just going through the process of corporate and moving through that. And I think one of the cool things is reaching what felt like a peak in corporate allowed me to see things in a way about what really matters and allowed me to question myself in terms of what matters. Like you said, there was the jets, there was the lights. It was fun. It was a bunch of fun. Um, but also at the same time, when you're standing on, when you're standing there, you think to yourself like, all right, what is next? Because this is what would be a serious accomplishment in one's life. What comes next? And that's that AD moment. That's when I think you also were in a place, and I'd love for you to get into that part of your story as well. You were also in a place in corporate, moving quite quite quickly up the ladder, and yet still decided, listen, man, I'm gonna drop this. I'm gonna reject the offers that are coming to me. I'm gonna take that step. You know what I'm saying? So I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And like, so I'll answer kind of, I'll share a little bit about what you asked about, like that transition point for me, and then I'll jump back to another question I have for you. But
Are we doing these three? How do you want to do these?
yeah, that's cool. That's cool. That's cool. Do you want me to answer that question, or do you want to start? Do you want to start?
Finish yours because I have so many questions for you too. As excited as you were for that.
So, but like, so yeah, so that transition point for me was definitely like, I think if I could be vulnerable and powerful in that for a moment.
Amen.
Yep. Leaving college, especially like all the homies, I was the young one, which meant like a bunch of the gang, a bunch of the squad graduated before me. And I think there was this moment of just being like senior, junior, end of junior year, senior in college, and just being like, sure, I have examples in my family, but these are people that I look up to, my older brother, my dad, that have made this transition to like being successful adults, right? As black men and like through an academic path. And I'm looking like, can I really do this? Is this who I really want to be? Like I studied economics in college, but it didn't really connect with me the way that I thought it would, partly because they're very particular about the type of economics they teach you in these institutions, right? So
Mhm.
I just latched on to like, all right, I'm out. Let me get a job. Let me start making some money. Let me build a house. And from there, I can figure out what I want to do. And I started working in this corporate job, which was actually like, for what it was cool. Like people my age, people that were also in that same uncertain position, people I could connect with and do happy hour with. And it was dope. But I was working really, really hard to like make corporations money. And at the same time, I'm being inspired by, reading Cornell West and reading Angela Davis and reading like all of these things that really inspire me are tugging me back towards community. Meanwhile, I left college, I moved to the south side of Chicago, back where like my family is from. So there's tug toward community. And at a certain point, I just realized, well, let me stop putting all this effort in to make corporations money. I made it, I landed, I got a job, I have something on my resume that's an actual company that has employed me. Like it is possible, I'm employable. Now, after 2 years, because it wasn't a right away thing, but after 2 years of doing that, building a little foundation, I was like, let me jump to see if there's an opportunity for me to use these same skills towards something that's community focused. Hard to make that a short answer, but
It is. It is.
yeah, yeah.
One thing about you is that you've always been about that, right? And I don't think maybe you had realized it completely, but since I met you many many years ago, at this point now, you've always been about how do I want to help my community. I don't care what it is. I want to help my community, and going into corporate seemed to be one way to try and help the community. All right, let me get the bag and see how I can help my community
Yep.
through getting the bag. And then from there, it was cool to watch your transformation where you're just like, you know what, dude, forget the bag. I'm going right in literally to the community.
Yeah, I think there was a point for, and everybody's calling is different, but there was a point for me when I was examining the ways in which, like, and again, like, this leaked into our last conversation too, but America is a very particular place for Black people. And having been raised in Chicago, in the suburbs, like where I had different, less risk factors, and a lot more, like, doing good in school meant something, right? Like, it was crazy. And having this perspective put me in this position where it was like, all right, well, I feel like I have to give back. And so for me, it wasn't enough to be like, oh, at first it was like, I'm going to be a lawyer that helps. I'm going to be an entrepreneur that helps. And just the way that the life was pulling me, it was like, nah, 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 help first. Right. Like, you know,
Mm,
uh, I think a big shift in that too was I got to go to UCLA when I was in high school, and I got to hear Lupe Fiasco and Cornel West speak. And it was around the time that Cornel West was really pushing this phrase that has become like synonymous with him, which is, you can't lead the people if you don't love the people, and you can't save the people if you don't serve the people. And I
mm.
think that was something that I heard early, and then slowly started to manifest in me, where it was like, nah, service has to come first for me. And ever since then, I've been on the path I've been on.
I so that kind of like is a perfect starting point for my first question for you. As you say, like this path that you're on, right? So if you Google Miles Xavier now, what you'll find is just a whole bunch of Miles Xavier does this, Miles Xavier doing this. You know, there's going to be mentions of your name and your face doing work and sitting with some of the big decision makers in Chicago. Yet, you know, I know you, and you're very let's say you not a reserved person, but you're very careful about what you put out there about who you are in your personal life, whatever the case is. But you do so much more than what I think you can just Google about you. So what does Miles Xavier do?
Ah, dope, dope. You beat me to the punch. This was my next question for you. I wanted you to list out some of the different, like, areas and sectors too. So this is perfect. Yeah. Um, I serve the community, like, first and foremost, right? So I try and reduce violence in the community through the Center for Youth Violence Prevention. I'm the project director of that in Chicago. I also just completed a service year with the Chicago Food Depository, which had me tapped into a food pantry that was doing amazing things in Bronzeville and Inglewood. That has me thinking all kinds of, like, dope radical thoughts about how we can connect food pantries as this place where the people who are most in need of service come regularly. But also, like, that place filled me up, not only with ideas, but just like the love that's in that place through the struggle. Both the people serving and receiving was incredible. So I got to mention my work with the Food Depository and with Chosen Tabernacle. Shout out Pastor Gillespie, both of y'all. You know what I'm saying? It's love. And what else? I'm on the associate board of this organization called Chat, which advocates for speech and language therapy, especially for folks in underserved communities. But actually, just lifting up that speech and language therapy can help so many people in so many different ways. So that's an important part of trying to bring wraparound services to the communities that I work with. Um, I try and tap in as much as I can with the Chicago Race Riots of 1919 project, which is all about acknowledging the history of racial violence in Chicago from the race riot of 1919. We all hear about the Chicago fire. Now, Mrs. O'Leary's cow started a fire in Chicago, but we don't really hear about the race riot. And that actually has value as kind of an origin point historically for racial segregation, and the racial dynamics that keep Chicago as segregated as it is. And so I lift up their work. We're trying to get some art installations throughout the city. Basically, I build capacity for community-led initiatives, right? I try and help them whatever they need, whether it's connecting to other organizations, whether it's finding a space, whether it's finding volunteers, whether it's supporting their events, whether it's spreading awareness, whether it's getting a grant together and actually applying for something that, like, constitutes reparations for a certain community. Like, we're doing all that, and I'm lucky to be able to be in a position to address all of these different sectors through my work.
Woo! What a list. What a list. And even in there, I know what's in the pipe works. You haven't mentioned this job that you're doing currently right now. You know, you didn't mention some of the other things as well. So obviously the list goes on, but I think it's great to be able to hear you really put out, you know, what it is in almost totality your involvement with the city that you love and a city that you've made my second home.
Yeah, but speaking of second homes, I can't pass it off to you without this perfect segue of also doing the work in my second home, serving as the director of international outreach for the Mandulo Foundation, which is a big part of my brother's story. So, as you include your titles and all the things that you're working on right now, please bring that one to the forefront too.
For sure, for sure. Obviously, what I do is what I like to call a is being a business creative and a impact creative. I really do see my path and my occupation as a creative experience, and that finds itself in a way of being the director of Mandula Foundation, something that we started in 2018, a NGO that we big up, that we talk about and highlight over here often, but an NGO of family, really, the family and the seeing the talent that our joint family has, and seeing the passion that everybody has about impact, and being able to put organization around that, um, to achieve similar goals. So being able to pull that together, our first outing together as a business creative, as an impact creative, was trying to feed people during COVID-19, and we were able to be rather successful with that endeavor. Only in the fact that people were fed, and we expanded that, and then we included the food depository, which you were manning that site in Chicago, trying to expand what that impact looks like, and then opening up ourselves to enjoy the spoils of what it feels like to do good work, what it feels like to work hard as a team to achieve good work, and allowing that to shape into the organization that we have now, with a full pipeline of things to do, with a long list of near objectives, and a long list of accomplishments that we're racking up and that we're going towards. So there's that element of it, which is a big part of my identity and what I do, because it all centers around impact. And from that, co-founder of Chummy, which is a an e-commerce solution in Namibia. Specifically thinking, if you think at the moment Uber Eats, that's essentially is what it is. But we've got so many, even in there, we're what we're trying to build is a platform that allows people to be able to make money. We want the drivers to be able to make money, the merchants to be able to make money, the people that we hire to be able to make money, and really grow this into an opportunity for people that in Namibia is the second highest unemployment rates in the world. So understanding what that community needs, and then again being fortunate to stumble into um, this type of thing. Really, the universe just keeps laying these types of opportunities out, and from there, we the journey is the journey is long. We've got uh, the our coming startup right now. We're in the middle of prototyping a whole new idea and product that we're going to be bringing out into the market around investing and ethical investing and sustainability, bringing the truth of information to people, allowing them to invest in exotic currencies, really taking this idea of impact and of ethics and of sustainability and of making a change and applying that to every different outlet that we have in a creative manner. So the calendar is full, but so is the list of things that we're doing to change our communities.
Yes, sir. So as you look at this like fleet of ships at which you are like the captain or the first mate, like you're heavily involved at the helm. What would you say is like your overall mission? You know what I mean?
That's such a good question. That's such a good question. What I'd have to say my overall mission um, is to continue to adhere to what the universe is I understand that the universe operates in kindness, right? And I also understand that everything that we do now with the right intention lays a foundation for somebody else to do something great. It could be, it could be just a simple opportunity like we did recently of being able to get a young lady a scholarship from an orphanage and then give her a laptop, like completely believing like this child can really change the world, and trying to get them to be able to believe it too, and doing what we can to spend time with these kids and help them realize like, hey, the limitations to what you want to become are just dependent on what you're willing to do, that what you're willing to do to get there. And so my mission, I believe, is to be able to bring that type of opportunity to as many children as possible. And I would like for that to be my contribution towards my tenure here on this rock that we all share.
Yeah, I love the way that the way that you phrase that, because that is so true to how I see you operate. You know what I mean? Like, so as you think about bringing resources to communities and kids that don't have access, what are your thoughts on why these disparities in access exist in the first place? And how do we address like the root cause of why you got to go give somebody a laptop rather than why they don't, you know?
Yeah, and you stealing my question time, by the way, too. You totally stealing my question time because I got
For
some.
this one, I got to hear what you got to say. I got to.
uh, So the question is, what do I think are the causes of what we're seeing?
Yeah, like, yeah, why is like everything you described is bringing people the resources that they need to survive, food, right? Giving them access to technology, the resources that they need to compete in a modern environment. But you're addressing all of these disparities, it seems like, all of these gaps, all
Mm.
of these like why does Soweto look like it does? You know what I mean? Like why is it up to you and Chills and Mo and P and all the other organizations that are for the people to come and fix this?
It's the beautiful thing about perspective and the beautiful thing about being able to do the work that we do, spreading across Chicago and South Africa. And something we joke about all the time is connecting the diaspora, and seeing what that actually looks like. But the issues tend to be very similar. Maybe the way in which the actions that follow the issue are are different, but the underlying issues are quite the same, in that there is a significant lack of infrastructure and capital support in certain communities. And what then happens from there is a almost predictable path of how families are put together and or how families are split apart, about the educational opportunities that children are able to have access to, and what that means. A great study by Malcolm Gladwell was that they looked at the top, they were looking at the kids with the highest IQs from the age of 5, and they it was a long blown study all the way up until the age of, I think, about 30, 40. And so in that time, what they did is, all the kids with the highest IQs, they wanted to see what ends up happening to the kids that score the highest on test scores and whatever, and are over, statistically more intelligent than the rest of the kids. And over time, it fluctuates in terms of what people end up becoming. The key determinant of which one of those kids would not be able to succeed was income, family household income, right? So poverty was literally the biggest determining factor in that study of whether a child is able to succeed or not. And understanding that type of statistic is, that I think that's what gets to the root of that issue, is the fact that you restrict some things within a community, and this is what ends up happening. Which
So
is, and
my bad, my bad.
no, go ahead. I was just going to ask you a similar question that I wanted to ask about Chicago.
Well, right quick, because like, where does that poverty come from? You know what I mean? In South Africa, because in Chicago, I know, and everybody who has listened to this podcast know where I'm about to go with it. So I want, I want to know where you feel like that poverty comes from, and how we address the root cause of it in the South African context.
Man, Funny enough, is the answer is going to be closer to Chicago as well, right? Which is the disenfranchising of people, the specific putting people in specific locations. Soweto being geographically far from the major cities and policed heavily as well, that type of thing. Back in the day, so it's the same issue that Chicago particularly has, but where I'm at in my juncture of activism and why I call myself an activist is that I'm no longer looking at the who brought us to where we are now. I'm looking at what we can do in order to change tomorrow. That's what I'm looking at. What I'm focused on is what my contribution is going to be towards the change. And so what that looks like in practice, and why I call it myself an activist. If you go on my LinkedIn, that's my first thing. Is that everything is a protest. Where like, and I hate to be that type of artist, but it's real. Like everything is a protest. Where with Mandula Foundation, we're protesting that poverty by bringing solutions. With what we're doing in Chomi, we're protesting that unemployment by bringing jobs to the people. We do that in a financial sense with financial literacy and that type of thing. So the focus is on being the solution, not necessarily looking at who caused it. But if we're speaking about cause solutions and situations, none is more famous than Chicago, which is infamously named Chirac, right? A moniker which has been rather controversial, a nickname that has been rather controversial, implying that Chicago is like the war that was happening in Iraq and putting that together, based on the type of killing that's happening. One thing that I always get when I say, "Hey, man, you know, I'm South African by way of Chicago," what people like to say is, "Oh man," like the almost immediately like, "What? There's a lot of killing there. What's up with that? What's up with that?" You being so close to that matter and speaking about the where issues come from, could you speak more towards what you believe is happening in Chicago and like how what you would do if you're given a magic wand in order to be able to fix it?
Yeah, I mean, in Chicago, people are hurting people, and I know for some people that might sound like it's cliche or it's overused, right? But it's this thing we refuse to acknowledge is that, like, and speaking specifically about America now, right? Like, black people have been, as you said, disenfranchised, have been oppressed, have been denied their humanity, and then denied political participation, and then denied the right to even amass a fortune on our own and be left alone, right? So, like,
Still happening.
so in the United States, like, like you asked me specifically about Chicago, right? In Chicago, right, we have these things called restrictive covenant. Like, Chicago, a big part of the black population moved to Chicago after the Great Migration, which is when a bunch of black people that were living in the South of the United States and were under the oppression of Jim Crow, which followed slavery, right? Which meant that there was the separate water fountains we see. It was the separate buses or having to sit in the back of the bus for black people, all the segregation by law, right? Black people were like, we ain't with this. We're trying to go to the North. In the North, there was segregation by fact, de facto segregation, which just meant that it was understood that white people and black people didn't do the same things in the same places, but it wasn't enforced by law in the same way, right? Or it wasn't codified by law in the same way. It was enforced, right? And so part of the segregation was also restrictive covenants, which meant that they were selling homes in valuable areas of Chicago with the express condition that if you buy this home, you cannot sell it to a black person after that, right? There were areas of there's what we know of as redlining, right? Which is selecting specific parts of the city, particularly those with black people and other people of color, and saying these are the areas where it's not to be invested in, right? So as the United States tries to, this is all happening in the 1920s after the New Deal, right? And so as the United States tries to recover from the Great Depression and offers white people all of these opportunities for home ownership, which then becomes the number one way that people in America amass wealth, right? And with wealth, safety and status, right? And also political clout and a bunch of other things. Black people are excluded from that. So you exclude black people from that, you put them in these certain areas. Then when they try and build things like community in whatever you provide them with, whether it's public housing, then you tear that public housing down and disperse people, right? They start to build communities in their schools and you tear those schools down. The largest closings of both public housing and of schools have both occurred within Chicago, right? So when you strip these things that keep communities together and allow the factors that bring people together in informal ways, right? The fact that I look out for the other kids on the block. If I see some kids doing something they're not supposed to be doing, I'm going to let somebody know, right? When you tear down our schools and you tear down the housing, you break those things in community, right? And you don't allow people to work certain jobs. You limit the transportation, even the infrastructure to get downtown where the jobs are. Like, you've completely cut these people off. I'm sorry I'm talking a lot, but let me give you this analogy, right? Imagine we're all playing Monopoly, and for 400 rounds, you cannot play. And then after 400 rounds of us playing Monopoly, I give you $200 and I say, you good, jump in this game, go ahead and play. You go and look for somebody to get some money from, or some resources from, or something.
Go to jail. Go to jail, Blackie.
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. So what we're looking at is the situation where we keep as a country and as a city saying we've done enough to help these Black people. We don't know why that they're doing all this violence. But really, we have not done enough to heal the people that have been excluded from this and have had to contribute to all of this wealth building and been excluded from the benefits for hundreds and hundreds of years. And until we address how we've treated those people, until we address the resources that they now need to be whole and come to the table on some kumbaya stuff, on some let's all work together now stuff. We're not whole yet. And part of the reason why I'm pushed you so hard in this conversation about South Africa is like, I think we need to part of repairing the harm that's been done to communities of color by colonialism, by white people, is acknowledging that harm. And like, we keep trying to put the cake in the oven without all the ingredients. And one of the ingredients is acknowledgement. And we're trying to keep putting the cake in the oven and say, we're just going to build wealth out of this. But there are still racist structures in place that destroy our wealth, even when we try and build it, destroy our wealthy people. Acknowledgement is part of that cake that we're trying to bake of equality. I ranted enough.
The name of this show is called Acknowledgement Cake.
But you feel me?
I do, and in the same way that you said at the beginning of this is, and we're running long on this, but I, because we got so much more content to get to, I still would love to hear, Miles has a dream. What is your dream for Chicago?
My dream for Chicago is take seriously movements to fund community-led initiatives to build community. Put the power in the hands of the people. And that doesn't mean that it can't be evidence-based. That doesn't mean that it can't be rigorously evaluated. But we continue to rely on policing. We continue to criminalize and over-surveil communities of color. We continue to, and this is beyond like issues of racism, right? We have to lift up women. We have to stop treating women the way that we treat them. We have to make sure that their voices are heard. Like my dream, if we're keeping it to policy, is like, all right, fine. Fund these people. Fund the people that are doing the work on the ground, and listen to these communities who we all just like love to turn on the TV and be like, oh, it's so sad what's happening there. Listen to what they're saying and implement it, right? It's so much of a deeper conversation than like, if you had a magic wand, what would you do? I would make people take community-led initiatives more as seriously as they take policing. Let's start there.
And until that happens, you can best believe over here on the All the Way Live podcast, we'll continue to highlight the people that are doing that good work. We'll continue to dedicate ourselves towards making sure that those people have a voice, they get acknowledged. And we also like to do a little something called Current News.